the activities that we're engaged in, I'm sorry, I'm usually used to standing up and looking at my screen, but where our principal service is Emerging Market Information Service. This is our flagship. It's what we started with. We've gotten more recently into the business of time series data through an acquisition in a couple of years ago in Asia, which we've made a global business. We've started a few things on our own over the years. Deal Watch is an example. We're actually right here in Bulgaria is sort of the editorial headquarters for this. We have a host of other services that are built off of these other products. Now, how we do things, I think, has always been a little bit different at ISI from traditional vendors that we compete against, and I think it's in one sense our history has been blessed by a window of opportunity back in the mid-90s when in fact we could send very junior people out to places like Sofia, which for people that we were hoping to sell to were still very, very exotic. It's not so much the case now, of course, but when we started, it was very unusual for information businesses of any stripe to have a significant presence in countries in Eastern Europe. And that has remained a focus for us. We've remained a very locally oriented business, and in fact, 65% of our business, and that number is actually now 67%, is derived from the emerging markets that we operate out of. So we've taken a very domestic approach to how we build our service based on local requirements. So again, using local sources was innovative for us at the time. Apologies. Innovative for the industry at the time. It's much more accepted today. But as we extend the footprint, we're obviously on the lookout for important sources that, as an aggregator in our core product, become important to what we do in the future. And lastly, as a general philosophy on data, we tend to buy it like most of you out here, rather than build it. But of course, we build it when it's important and when there are no alternatives, or when the quality issues direct us to build it ourselves. Now, just as I wanted to give a few slides here about our business and some of the trends in usage, because I want to be able to justify to you a case about the emerging markets as a whole. And to do so, I feel like I should have demonstrated a little bit of authority as to what our operation is all about. And if you look at these are recent figures from our own traffic logs about where it is that our usage is coming from. And the money centers is what we call New York and London, and you can see actually comparatively from a perspective of usage, it represents a very small part of our business. So, and the other interesting fact there is the height of that Asian bar, which, if you had asked me this question 4 years ago, would have been about half that. The growth for, I think, business in general, and our business in particular in Asia has been really stratospheric, and I think it points. I'll make this point a little later on. It very much points to where we think information activities will be headed. Again, this is a little bit more of the same broken down. Bulgaria is sort of in the middle there, as you can see. I thought I had to pull that out for our local audience. And again, I don't think that's particularly relevant. Now, the case for emerging markets from a business information perspective is pretty easy to make. 80% of the world's population. The BRICS, which is, I'm sure most of you know, Brazil, Russia, India, China, it's sort of a handy acronym that has become argot for emerging markets. But they now represent 45% of the world's labor supply, according to the OECD. And over the past 15 years, we've seen an enormous change in the patterns of how some of these major economies themselves are organized in terms of what their participation of trade and GDP are. Often, these countries are very poorly covered by information vendors because they're new to businesses that are in this industry, and they don't typically have a particularly well-evolved information structure on their own. Unlike anywhere else, however, people will pay a premium for good information that helps them get an edge. That goes to my first 2 points from my initial slide. And of course, our mandate is to grow the emerging and to view the emerging asset class as a growing one. And I suppose it's built right into our name. But I think the fundamental point is that we are in the 21st century in the very, very early stages of a massive transfer of wealth that is going from east to west. And this is notwithstanding the traumatic events that obviously are roiling capital markets today and will have an impact on everybody's business shortly if it hasn't already. But this is a multi-generational happening that I think we feel, at least at ISI Emerging Markets, will last for 30, 40 years before it peters out. So just, am I the only person feeling this way? I figure I'd go to some of my competitors and find out what the world is looking. As you may have guessed, we actually don't do a very good job covering information that isn't emerging market oriented. So I turned to worthy competitors that I think do a great job at this. And I just did some searches historically over the term emerging markets. And you can see over time, and I have a projected figure for 2008 because it's not done yet, but you can see that general interest, certainly from a, this is not a scientific study by any stretch of the imagination, but it is indicative. If you monitor the media and see how often the term comes up, it's quite clear that there's a lot more interest in it and coverage. And I'm also a supplier of data to Factiva, and I use this myself as a gauge for what sort of appetite. So these are stats from my own usage from a competing product. And what I've been interested in traditionally over the years as I look at this number is that those first two big blocks, they represent essentially the money center markets for us. So that's the US and UK. And as you might expect from a company that has built its business around the Fortune 4000, the majority of their traffic would relate to those areas. And in fact, it does. But what's interesting is the increase in the others. So and the others is relatively thin slices of data like mine that have gone into it from a perspective of the relative volume. It's actually becoming more important. So what are the best markets from ISI's perspective? Well, it's fairly straightforward. If you had gone back to the previous slides that I put up here, you